Hello and welcome to the Computer Vision Festival, hosted by the AI Accelerator Institute, a global community of over 400,000 AI leaders and practitioners, all striving towards one shared goal: inspiring the next generation of machine intelligence. With expert presentations on the festival agenda covering everything from space exploration on Mars to self-supervised learning, you're in for a treat. If you have any questions for our speakers or want to connect with them further, then ask away in the comments sections of the video and hear them answered at the end of each session in our live Q&As. If throughout the day you're loving the content, then be sure to check out the AI membership plans, where you can get access to exclusive content in the form of interviews, reports and articles. Access all areas passes to all past and future events. You can also join our Slack community, which is home to more than 2,500 fellow AI, machine learning and computer vision professionals, and is full of dynamic conversations and contributions. So if you're not already a member, come and join us today. Sign up using the link on the AI Accelerator Institute website. I want to say a massive thank you to all of our sponsors and partners for helping us to bring the festival to your screens today. Our amazing speakers for contributing some awesome content, and to you, our attendees, for joining us today. That's it from us, so go ahead, sit back, relax, and enjoy the festival. Just takes about 15 seconds or so. And then, yeah, so really excited about this one. AI have invited our dear friend, Ashok Ramani, to give this presentation. We've been working hand in hand on a few different projects, so watch out for that. And Ashok himself, he has led the successful multi-year AI transformation at scale at eBay, enabling business use cases in recommendations, search relevance, personalization, marketing, risk leveraging, state of the art in computer vision, NLP, and AI platform. And today he shares his learnings with us. And on that note, I'll leave it over to you, Ashok.
Awesome. Thank you for the warm intro, Jordan. It's always exciting to be out of this forum and this community. Thank you for taking the time, folks. I'm super excited to be talking about and sharing my learnings of the journey and what I've learned in the past, I would say 8 to 10 years. So let me start with this something that my role, right? So he's into Python and he's kind of like Alexa and Google. So he was asking this question, right? Dad, is building AI hard? And then I paused for a moment and I had this kind of, if you're familiar with the Calvin and Hobbes comic strip, and the dad responds in a very kind of sarcastic way to the son. So I first responded saying, you know what? AI is easy. Just throw in a bunch of GPUs, gets lots and lots of data, hire a bunch of smart PhD folks, and voila, you have AI, right? And again, in reality, AI is complicated. We're all learning through this. There's new emerging disciplines that are coming. We're challenges every day we hear about. But I think with some disciplined approach or with a mix of approaches, we can actually, I wouldn't say crack the nut, but I think we can be more methodical about it. We can be more effective and also efficient about going through this process. And that's really what I wanted to share today, is some of the approaches that I have seen and what works and what does not in them. And how do you actually, as an enterprise, build the AI DNA, right? And there's a combination of people, process, and product, right? So I'm going to share some learnings with you. And then finally, I'm going to be talking about a strategic framework, right? When you actually embark on these AI transformation, what kind of a framework can you put in place? What are the gotchas and pitfalls, right? So we're going to be touching upon all of 3 of these. Okay, so let's start with some of these approaches. And the first one, I'm sure all of you are very familiar with this, right? So when you embark on an AI project, we all know AI is iterative in nature, it's experimental in nature. So we start with POCs, right? It's a great way to start. So let's say you are running an online fashion e-commerce outlet and you say, hey, okay, let's try this computer vision model. We know that buyers like to shop visually. Maybe we want to see if they can just say, hey, I want this teal colored scarf, and we want to have a computer vision model that predicts the colors by processing our inventory so we can surface it in the search results. So you go about your discovery, you kind of have some hypothesis, you collect the data, you build a model, and then you launch it in an inference engine, you learn from it, right? So this is a really nice way to start a POC because it's small. You get quick validated learnings and at a minimal cost, and it's a true agile mindset, right? Now, what happens when you start having these proof of concepts? So the POCs start kind of, you have hundreds and thousands, right? You got the marketing organization doing a bunch of POCs. You got the search and relevance, the personalization. You got the customer support team doing some chatbot kind of POCs. Before you know, you're going to start having these proliferations of POCs, right? And then each of these teams start embarking on building the so-called frameworks or engines or platforms to or data pipelines to start managing their POCs. In some way, you start having fragmentation of semi-platforms. And this is really what I'm starting to call as the death by POCs trap that you need to watch out for, right? The key thing is the questions that I leave on the table for now, and we'll revisit, is when you do these POCs, how are you capturing the learnings, right? Are they just in the tribal knowledge of people's heads? Are they on Git repositories? Are the data sets just lying in your data warehouses and your lakes? How do you capture them, right? And scale them for the enterprise? And the Uber question is really, is this set of POCs that you're doing in one-off manner, how does this align with your overall AI strategy or the company strategy to enable the business and its customers? So that's one approach, the POC. It's a great way to start that we've seen. On the other end of the spectrum is it's almost like a big bang approach. And with this approach, it's like you have a North Star. The company comes, enterprise says, hey, okay, we have a vision of what the AI strategy, the vision of an AI engine looks like, right? We've got a way to manage the life cycle of models, experiment. We've got feedback loop. We want to build higher order services with computer vision, maybe an OCR service, object detection recognition services. We want to build NLP, machine translation, speech and speech to text, dialogue management. So it's a great way to set that North Star and building towards that. Then you have your functional teams. This could be like your customer support, your risk teams, your ads, your experience, merchandising teams start building domain specific models, leveraging the AI engine to enable experiences. So the upside of this is really that you are rallying the enterprise towards a common vision, right? You're building from the beginning for scale. And to some extent, there is alignment. Now, the catch is this truly agile? You may say, hey, okay, with as any big IT investments, you may say that, okay, this is a multi-year journey. And this something like, let's say a marketing team comes and says, we want this particular capability, right? Or we want these data sets. Now, having a centralized control over that means this is going to be a year down the roadmap. Now, are they going to be happy with that? They may end up going and doing things on their own. So you end up having this kind of a redundancy, fragmentation again being created, and that does not become healthy, right? So, and it also becomes costly, and more importantly, because you don't have the velocity as an organization when compared to the POC, where you get proof points along the way, there's a huge opportunity cost, right? So you have these two, I would say, one is like a small agile iterative, and then there's a big bang. And we're going to come back to these both and see how they can actually be working together to create your AI strategy. Okay, so when we actually look at this, there's a bunch of questions that typically come up, right? Like, okay, how do you evolve from a set of POCs to the enterprise-wide effort? How do you prioritize what opportunities to go after in terms of the POCs or large investments? And how do you set a company-wide vision and strategy that helps us get to that? And how do you measure, are we doing this efficiently? Are we doing this effectively? What's the ROI? And along the way, how do we make sure that we minimize technical debt, right? So we don't create these offshoot capabilities that is just difficult to manage. And this is where it all boils down to, how do we do AI as a discipline? And I would say this particular definition really caught my eye, and this is by David Stefano in one of the blogs. And what he really talks about is, what is the personality of your organization, and what is the performance of that organization. And to simplify, you can really build it down into people, process, and product, right? So I'm just going to touch upon these pillars of what I'm calling as the AI DNA and some consideration. Now, for most of you, this is going to be like preaching to the car. For some of you, it's like, yeah, aha moment is going to be there. Love to engage on during the Q&A on these, right? So let's touch upon the people aspect of the AI DNA, which again, personally, I think is one of the most important pillars, right? The first thing is about customers. We talk a lot about technology, we talk a lot about AI, right? But truly, what are we doing this for? It's always good to put that in perspective and start with the end goal, right? Who are we solving for, right? What are their needs? What are their wants? And why are we doing this, right? Because it could be a recent college grad that's just looking to buy a laptop, or it could be a professional that's applying for a mortgage, or a granddad that's buying a toy for his grandchild, or it could be a mom that's shopping for a vacation rental. Now, in each of these scenarios, when we are creating experiences based off of our AI models, whether it be computer vision, NLP, or recommendation engine, it's important to, what I call, is showing the empathy. And why is that important? It helps us build AI that's purposeful and impactful. When we understand the user's journey, we are much more can connect to the user, right? Whether it be a personalization, a recommendation. And we talk about a lot these days on the emerging discipline of responsible AI, and making sure that we don't create unconscious bias. By knowing who our customers are, we can make sure that in our day-to-day DNA, in our practices, whether it be curating the data, whether it be collecting data, whether it be sampling data. I'm sure there's quite a few statisticians on what is the best way to sample data, right? Are we unconsciously discriminating a portions of segments of our customers? And that becomes super important. So when we actually look at it from a people angle, we empathize with our customers, understand who they are, and then we build AI. We are very much building the DNA and muscle in our organization to ensure that this is always there, right? It has to be like muscle memory, right? Hey, okay, we're not doing something that is opposing to the culture that the company specifies as the AI DNA. The other point is, some of us here in the computer vision, we always talk about data sets, right? Like ImageNet, and we are passionate about giving back to the community with public data sets. Now, when we do that, we have to be cognizant of the fact of, are we using PII data? For example, this granddad may have taken a picture of the toy with his grandchild and submitted as a review. Now, are you using that to build models? That might be okay. But then when you try to open source a public data set, are you actually exposing what would be considered as a PII data? So some of these ethical considerations is something that we have to be cognizant of, not just by solving for the people, but being respectful and ensure that we have the governance in place. So that's one aspect of the people aspect of the AI DNA. Now let's look at the process. Many of you are already building computer vision models, AI models. You're deploying them, you're inferencing, you're doing the feedback loop, right? When I ask you, hey, what is your AI team, right? Some of you may say, hey, okay, we got maybe 2 computer vision scientists, we got a front-end engineer, we got a data engineer, a back-end engineer, we have an analyst and a product manager, right? So typical single pizza-sized team. What I'm trying to highlight here is, it's very important when we talk about an AI team as something more holistic. We want to be interdisciplinary, right? It's that design, it's a policy, the governance folks in place, right? Do we understand the entire folks from the value chain? Do we have the domain experts that we are solving for? And that's where, when you actually embark on the discovery process, how do you bring together so you have a holistic understanding for the team? Um, what I've seen that does not work is you have the product manager going and talking to a bunch of stakeholders, like folks in the domain, the verticals team, or maybe in the finance team or the risk team, and coming back with a set of requirements and handing it to the AI team. What I've seen really work is you embark on a discovery together. So we get into the room, or maybe in these days, Zoom call, and we have the AI researchers, we have the data engineers, we have the engineering leads, and the product manager, along with user research and design, going through the discovery initially. And we've done this in the past, right? When we embarked on trying to detect counterfeits, we did that. When we wanted to embark on visual search for a particular category of women's dresses, we did that. So it's very important that we take the time as a holistic team to understand in the discovery and the problem space before we embark in the solution space and start building things. And again, you can argue you could do like a top down and a bottoms up approach in parallel. Sometimes the data tells us a lot about things, and that's fine too. But it's important to invest the time in the discovery through what I call as a joint directed discovery. And that gets everyone in a common shared understanding. And then you can always go about your scrum, building your kind of hypothesis, your backlog, you build, measure, and learn, right? Um, One of the key things that is important as you go about launching and learning in the feedback loop is, are we actually instrumenting for the feedback loop? A lot of times there is this thing about, hey, okay, let's do a POC, let's scramble, get the model out, let's deploy, let's maybe do some analytics and done, right? But then the question that typically your computer vision scientist, your data scientist is asking, okay, what about my feedback data? How am I going to get it? So some of these you want to plan ahead, right? And it's okay that you do this initially in a manual way, maybe for the first couple of iterations before you start investing in automation. So you have a way to get that labeled data back into your system in the hands of your computer vision scientist or your NLP scientist, so they can go and iterate on the model. So the key takeaway here is we can all learn from each other, and spending the time initially in the problem space, understanding and discovering what use cases needs and wants, the user journey, why would they want to come, and how does design and AI actually fit in together, right? Complement each other, augment each other is super important. And as we go down this, we start building things so we can actually collect the data and we instrument for the feedback cycle. So that's super important. And then as we start scaling, the automation can kick in. Okay, so the next part of thing is, we talked about two approaches here. One of them was, hey, we start doing POCs. The other is the big bang approach of the AI engine, right? Now, what would really make sense is, how do these two kind of a hybrid or actually complement each other? So you can set an enterprise-wide AI vision, right, for scale. And this could be a multi-year, 3-year, 5-year, saying this is kind of where we want to be, right? And it has these kind of the stack, it has the discoverable and shareable data sets, it has the embeddings, you have the online serving store, you have the feedback and experimentation, all of that built in, right? You take the time to build it, and these days there are plenty of open source or on cloud that you could actually leverage. But the key thing here is, as you do these POCs, it's super important to take those learnings out of each of those POCs and start funneling them into the kind of overall engine. And that helps build pieces of the puzzles. And if you were the core AI team in the building that AI engine, you can actually start looking at it and prioritizing based on, hey, okay, I know that this personalization team wants to this particular feature in inferencing, or if you were a data team in the AI engine, you may say that, okay, we want to get these data sets because it's not just useful for one particular team's POC, but another team's POC. And where that really helps is, one, it avoids the fragmentation where you start creating duplicate data sets, right? It's not efficient, but it's not also productive. So you have a central repository where the things are discoverable. The other thing is adopting in some way an open source, internal open source model can help build the AI engine, right? So I talked about like the personalization engine. If they want a particular feature, they want to be able to do some data cleansing operation, or they want to access a serving feature store. Collaborating with those teams to build this together and launch that as the first use case can go a long way, because then the domain teams are focused on solving the domain specific problems, while the AI engine or the core IT team is focused on solving the horizontal at scale problem. But then you start building pieces of this puzzle, right? So yes, I mean, even in this, there are a few gotchas. You got to make sure that, okay, are you actually moving in the velocity? How do you keep the different stakeholders informed, right, of your roadmap? How do you make sure that you are delivering to these things, right? So that is a kind of a community engagement and a setup that is super critical when you actually take this kind of an approach to scaling for the enterprise. Now, let me touch upon the last part of the session is for some of us, when we embark on AI, it's greenfield, right? It's like a 0 to 1 and then a 1 to scale problem. But for some of us in the large enterprises, for some AI machine learning is new. In some, there is already machine learning that's being done, right? So their transformation is a lot more difficult, and one of the things that I've learned is it's so much about a cultural change as it is about technology, right? And what we see is, I have a quote from my eBay CTO who actually talks about AI as an ecosystem. But when it comes to transformation, he made a very profound remark. He said the analogy he was giving is for existing businesses, think of it as almost like a plane that's in midair in flight. And then when you want to transform things, you're swapping the avionics, you're swapping the inside experiences, right? You're trying to swap the crew, you're trying to swap the navigation system. And that's super hard, right? Because you got existing business, you got your customers. So swapping things is not necessarily easy. In fact, it's so much more difficult, and you might actually see resistance to doing it because there's potential to cannibalize existing revenue. So how do you go about doing this? Again, some of the learnings I've seen is it's really starting to understand your enterprise-wide dynamics, right? What are the behaviors, what patterns, right? What are the different stakeholders, which are the domains, and what is the function of the core IT team or the centralized AI team, if there's one. And then understanding which teams are more risk averse and which ones are early adopters, or some of them are laggards, and then trying to make sure that you identify what would actually help in the transformation process. And the second one is really super critical, is really start embarking on this transformation in a very much a collaborative way. What does not work, I've seen, is a central team building something without its stakeholders and throwing things over the wall, right? That's a no-no. What has worked is when you're actually building this kind of an AI engine, there might be a core computer vision, an NLP, or a platform team that's building it. But then you have AI teams in some domain teams, right? Or maybe there are product teams and engineering teams. How can you actually bring them under the umbrella to kind of establish a shared vision, establish a multi-year strategy, and then on maybe a quarterly basis, right, you start rolling out things and you understand what POCs they're doing. You're in an agile manner, you build to empower them in the POCs, and endless champions, right? Because this is again about people and organizational barriers and breaking down silos. So the more you actually incentivize collaboration, sharing, and reuse, it's great, right? Somebody creates a data set, you want to take and see how somebody else can do it. Somebody builds a computer vision deep learning model, another team actually takes it and swaps the last layer, or does a transfer learning and applies it, right? You incentivize those behaviors. So a lot of it actually comes down to how do you empower and set the right structure for this open collaboration where folks are informed and are actually incentivized to contribute for the big of the larger enterprise. And support, right? As you're the execs, as the leaders in your organization, some of them can be bottoms up organic efforts. I've seen teams reach out and say, hey, you know what, this problem is not something that we want to solve. We are in, for example, in the computer customer support domain. You are the central team, go ahead and solve it. We will partner with you, and we can collaborate. We'll fund you with some resources. But in some cases, there is resistance, right? Because some organizations are, I call them, much more opulent functional units, and they may say, you know what, I'm just going to go off and build my own mini platform in here, right? And sometimes it's good, because competition is good. Not necessarily everything has to be centralized, but you got to be watchful of that. And that's kind of where some of these top-down priorities and alignment is super helpful. The other thing I would call out is AI is iterative, it's experimental. We're all learning, right? And sometimes we don't really know how this might impact revenue, how this might impact the experience. So the request to some of the leaders on this session is be patient, but hold your teams accountable, right? To get those learnings. So give them enough runway to iterate through a few cycles, right? Maybe a quarter or 2 quarters, or sometimes even a year for those bigger ones. So the learnings, and they know that, hey, here are the learnings. This is how we are pivoting. We've understood that this does not work, this works. So we want to go and tweak these parts of the experience or the model, right? The last thing I would say is invest in education, training, and evangelizing. And again, this is not about the fundamentals of AI, right? You got plenty of Coursera courses, plenty of Udemy or whatever courses that you have. But this is about educating your stakeholders inside the company about what is the AI vision, what is the strategy, where we are in that journey. And it's a constant communication, right? Going back to the execs, going back to the practitioners, going back to this team, and really talking this and reinforcing, and most importantly, celebrating the wins. And hey, this is what we learned. Maybe it was a failure, but how do you build that? And that's very important, because the more we do that, you start building that flywheel that initially is slow to take off, but over time you see that momentum gets built, and then your enterprise is actually a kind of a well-oiled machine that's moving. You have that engine that's churning, and then the POCs are actually moving faster and leveraging each other's work. So some of this could be abstract, I fully understand, but here's some of the learnings that at least my team and I have gone through that I thought I would be worthwhile sharing. And again, happy to take questions, and also more importantly, engage further as we embark on, again, I've started my own venture to really consult on this, working with Jordan on the AI accelerator team. But really what we touched upon today was around these different approaches, ups and downs of this, the AI DNA, that's core. How do you look at it from an AI lens? And how do you embark on the framework itself? So thank you. I'm going to pause now and see if there are any questions. Jordan?
Okay, Ashok, yeah, a massive thank you for wrapping up the festival with that great presentation. What a marvelous end to the day we've had. And like Ashok said, please do follow him. He's up to some fantastic stuff. And also in collaboration, a few things in collaboration with AI. We've got a podcast coming out soon called AI Bites, which Ashok has kindly it will be kindly hosting, and we've got some great guests lined up and some fantastic topics, so do watch out for that too. So one question in so far, Ashok, we'll wait for the rest to come in, but we'll start off with Lolita. Do you think it makes sense to use AI for short life products, brackets, so you need to make model fast and adjust it, or is this a bad strategy for the company?
Yeah, so I'm not entirely sure what short life products mean, but I would say that before we start putting the cart before the horse, right? I would say, okay, it's important to understand what is the short life product. Does it really need AI, right? A lot of times we embark and say, you know what, it's like, okay, let's use the Swiss Army knife when we really don't need it, right? So without much context, I would say for short life products, maybe AI is an answer, maybe it is not. And that's really why, Lilita, I would say is, go through the discovery, right? Understand the problem space better, and then figure out if that solution is actually needs to be powered by AI. You'll be surprised. In one of our experiments, we actually thought, like, we had these teams come in and say, oh, you know what, when users type in customer support in our search engine, we want to be able to understand, apply NLP and all do it, right? And then we said, okay, can you just do it with a keyword match and initially see what kind of a lift and do the hypothesis, right? There was no AI, there was already a rules engine, and we saw that we were getting significant lift, and in most cases 80% of the words were just working with the keywords, and we were happy with it, right? So before you embark on even question is, okay, do you really need AI, could be a question to ask, right? And sometimes it maybe makes sense, and this is really where, Lilita, I would say maybe some proof point POCs before you invest in big, because with short life products, some of them are going to be throwaway. So but tease out the patterns when you do these short life products and start building capabilities or building that infrastructure so you can do more of these for other types of short life products. That would be my suggestion.
Okay, great answer, Ashok. So thanks, Jacob, for your nice comment there. And we've got a few more minutes, so we can wait around for a few more questions. If anyone does want to catch up with Ashok, you can do it now, or he's happy to take questions via LinkedIn after this session. So another question from Tamar. I'll just read it out while you read it to yourself, Ashok. What have you seen about how the dynamics between social demand, business action, and government regulation works?
Okay, so I will be candid. I am not huge into government regulations, but one of the things that I do see is, and again, this is kind of what I talk about in terms of responsible AI, right? I think a lot of it comes from being able to build that into your DNA and share the empathy with your customers, right? Ultimately, we are trying to influence people, help them with their purpose, right? So it comes down to, like, each of us, are we accountable for our actions, right? And build AI in a way that we can stand by it and say that, yes, we did it with the best of our intention, that we actually did this, right? But I'm not very sure about the government regulation part. I'm not too familiar. Sorry about that, Tamar.
No problem. Thanks, Ashok. And all questions welcome, Tamar. So thanks again, Jacob, for pitching in with another question. So do you have a best practice how to prioritize use cases for piloting? In my experience, there's often too many ideas.
Yes. Okay. Great question, Jacob. Yes, and this is something that we all struggle with constantly. I will acknowledge that, right? And I think that I wouldn't say there's one best practice, right? So a lot of times there is always the prioritize when I talk about when we go through the discovery, right? There are the domain experts. This could be your vertical, and I see that you're probably at Volkswagen, right? Maybe there are some that in your domain may actually know better and say that, you know what, these are the priority use cases that I've seen. Maybe there are competitive pressures. Maybe we want to be on par with competition, right? Maybe somebody has launched a similar app. In some cases, this is a pain point that we have not been able to solve, right? And sometimes we just take and say, hey, okay, what is the fastest path to get some learnings, right? So again, what I've seen is taking a case-by-case basis and looking at it. And this is really why I would say that, the holistic team is coming together in a very objective manner is helpful, right? But I would say that there has to be one decision maker, and that's typically, again, I've seen is like the product manager that's trying to say, yes, I will get inputs from everyone, but here is the prioritization, right? And we go about it, do we agree, right? And then march on to the POCs, and if it doesn't work, iterate.
Perfect. Very thorough answer there, Ashok. So next question is up from Amanda. So Ashok, in your experience, who handles data labeling for large-scale enterprises? In-house, outsourced? What's the options?
Yeah, so I think it's been, I've seen both patterns. We've used outsource, we have used third-party vendors that are, and in some cases we have seen our a centralized data team actually do it itself, and in some cases we have our computer vision or NLP folks actually do it. Maybe some of them, what they do is they run an algorithm that does a first pass labeling. And then we've seen for machine translation, for example, first pass, they actually take it, they crawl, they run a first pass internally, and then they send it over, and that actually minimizes cost. And when we send it to a third party, because it's human curated, right, or human annotated. So we've seen both models and also a hybrid model. And again, depending on the use case, you got to pick and choose.
Cool. Nice one. Thank you so much, Ashok. So unless anyone wants to jump in with one last question, I think we can wrap that. That brings us to the end of day one of the Computer Vision Festival. Well rounded off by yourself, Ashok. So yeah, can't thank you enough for all the help that you give AI. Oh, we've got one more question here from Jacob. Why not? So thanks. What's your experience on make or buy decision? Rather do it yourself or buy a solution or developers from outside?
Yeah. So this is a great question. So I think when we embarked, at least I would say way back at eBay, at that point, this was like 5-6 years ago, there was not like a platform, right? These days you got the cloud providers, and then there's always a debate about the cloud versus on-prem, right? You got the Amazon, SageMakers, the Google, and the Azure's all like pumping in billions of dollars to make this, right? So, and sometimes you want to get other enterprise vendors also coming in and offer on-prem, right? So one of the methodologies that we've seen is, instead of investing, again, depends on the maturity of your organization, instead of going with a vendor solution, can you actually build off of open source if you have the right skill set? So I would actually say there's cloud, there's vendor on-prem, there's also, can you actually take the open source model and actually build it in-house and then giving back to the community with open source solutions, right? And there's plenty of that, right? Like you've seen machine learning frameworks and MLOps coming in from like the Uber, Michelangelo. We have also in eBay, we kind of talked about Krylov. So there's a lot of these frameworks that are coming in. So Jacob, I would say that you got to evaluate even that as an option, right? Not just like build, or it's a kind of a build option in some way.
Nice. Yeah, perfect answer, Ashok. So just one last comment from Pruthi. It's not too much of a question, but kind of resembles the framework that they have built internally. But yeah, many thanks, Ashok. I'm sure we'll be seeing you tomorrow sometime in the audience, but it's always a pleasure to have you on stage, the virtual stage, and I'm sure we will speak soon. Thank you. A massive thank you to our audience for sticking around today. We go again tomorrow.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thanks to the audience. See you tomorrow. Bye-bye.